When we think about how psychedelics are being normalized in today's world, there are two main paths that these important medicines are taking. The first path is medicalization, and the other path is decriminalization. In today's video, I'm going to talk a little bit about both paths and the pros and cons for each one. First of all, these paths are not mutually exclusive. In fact, medicalizing psychedelics supports the decriminalization process, and decriminalizing psychedelics supports more research and awareness into the medical benefits of these important compounds. But there is a significant difference in the approach for each one. The medicalization route is much more industrial in nature. It's much more centralized in nature. And this approach has been led by organizations like MAPS, USONA, and Hefter, and now with dozens of companies and hundreds of millions of dollars of financing pouring into the space, the vast majority of the new psychedelic companies are pursuing the medicalization route. They're looking to raise tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to do drug development on compounds like psilocybin and MDMA and 2CB and 2CI and 4-ACO-DMT and any other number of synthetic compounds that they can then develop in such a way where they prove to the FDA that, hey, this compound is safe and it can be used to treat depression. It can be used to treat PTSD. It can be used to treat addiction. And then by proving that to the FDA, the substance becomes medicalized. Then psychotherapists and psychiatrists and medical doctors can prescribe something like MDMA to a patient who can then come into a clinical setting to go through a treatment with the help of that drug or compound. The medicalization process is hopefully covered by insurance. It tends to be more expensive because of that, and it will require a few more years of substantial research and hundreds of millions of dollars more in funding to ensure that that path is fully fleshed out. We've seen the beginning of the medicalization path with ketamine in particular, and how ketamine is currently used. And a lot of people in the medical space and psychedelics are sort of hoping that ketamine will act as a great pilot that then psilocybin and MDMA and all these other psychedelics can start to fill in as clinics and centers and other spots start to open up to offer psychedelic therapy. So on the one hand, we have medicalization. On the other hand, you have the movement around decriminalization. And that's happened in places like Denver and Oakland and Santa Cruz and dozens of other cities who are looking to decriminalize both psilocybin mushrooms and all psychoactive plant medicine. Now, the tremendous upside to decriminalization is that we stop arresting people for having possession of these medicines. In other words, nature is no longer illegal. And that's critical from a social justice, from a social equity perspective, from ensuring that we don't, for example, put all this money into medicalization so people can go into fancy clinics to take it, but then those who just want to grow their own mushrooms at home, it's supposedly illegal. We want there to be a balance between the two. And the tremendous upside to the decriminalization route is it keeps a lot of the resources and money out of the hands of ultra corporate players who are starting to enter the psychedelic space. In particular, for-profit pharmaceutical companies who in the past have not necessarily had the best intentions for the people and the patients they were treating. And what's great about the decriminalization route is that it focuses much more on education and training and awareness, and it's much more about communities and rebuilding communities. So that, like, for example, with the Grow, Gather, Gift initiative that Oakland is starting to experiment with in the decriminalization route, it's about how we can grow our own mushrooms, we can gather those mushrooms, and then we can gift them to people in our community. And for that reason, no one can actually charge money for the substance itself, right? It's free because mushrooms grow everywhere. The only thing in the decrim sort of model that can be charged for is if you're a guide or a sitter or a therapist who's spending your time and energy to hold space for someone who is going through that experience. Now, that is much different than the medicalization route, where there are companies who are looking to create intellectual property around certain compounds like psilocybin, patenting psilocybin, which grows everywhere, so they can charge an incredible premium for that and then make a lot more profit as a result. Now, that's not bad or good, that's just how it is. My personal preference is for the decriminalization route. I think the medicalization route will win in the short to midterm over the next 3 to 4 to 5 years. There will be a lot of progress that's made as hundreds of millions of dollars pour into the psychedelic space for FDA approval. However, I strongly believe with the rise of interest in precision medicine, with the rise of education around psychedelic substances that's totally free, and with more and more cities looking to defund their police departments, that essentially decriminalization will be the much more efficient and effective long-term route for psychedelic normalization. I believe that specifically because the decriminalization route will keep the psychedelic medicines out of the interests and hands of incredibly wealthy stakeholders and instead ensure that this medicine remains accessible to as many people as possible. And that is critical to the success of this movement when it comes to psychedelic substances. Now, if you want to learn more about the psychedelic movement, if you want to learn more about the third wave of psychedelics and why we've seen a resurgence of interest in these medicines, go to thethirdwave.co, where you can find out a lot more about the importance of these medicines, and in particular, how you can find the ideal healing center or retreat for your needs. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to stay up to date on the third wave of psychedelics, subscribe to this channel and visit thethirdwave.co, where you'll find plenty of free resources on intentional and responsible psychedelic use.